Vosefski joins us now. She is 90 years old, but forget the age thing. She sounds like she's 60. I'm going to introduce you to her in a second. She's written a book called The 9 Lives of Curious Edith. There was a great review of it in the Chicago Tribune last December, and I need to read this because it really sums it up. Looking at the cover of the recently released The 9 Lives of Curious Edith, one would expect a memoir about a British dame or a 1950s Turner classic movie star with a dash of Downton Abbey thrown in. But it's when you pore over the 300-plus pages that you get a glimpse of an individual who knows the benefit of continuous learning and reinvention. It's about her teaching career, her 64-year marriage to Joseph, an electrical engineer, and traveling to 27 countries in 25 years. What an extraordinary life. Edith, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm just thrilled to be here.
So let's talk about why you wrote the book. Did you write the book so you could open people's eyes to possibilities and how you lived, that you were a doer and you and Joseph did a lot of things?
Well, that's basically the reason. But I had a lot of my friends keep saying to me, you know, you're so different. Your life is so beautiful and so unusual. You should write a book. I heard that over and over. And they'd say, well, you tell such great stories. You ought to write them down and let people know how you've managed your life. So they talked me into it. But I had written some children's books first. And I did take just one class in creative writing. And that teacher kept saying, write what you know. Well, what would I know better than my life? So that was it.
Yeah, that was a great piece of advice. You told me a lot of funny stories. And tell us about the story, because everybody can relate to this when they get in a relationship with somebody and they're introducing them to their family. What happened when you met Joseph and then you introduced him to your mom?
Well, I left college, which was Northwestern University, and went directly to my very first job. And Joe was there, and it was a home for boys whose parents had either died or sometimes it was a divorce, but they didn't have anyone to care for them after their family went to pieces. And this was run by the Episcopal Diocese of Chicago. And I got the job to come and help to make a speech program for the kids. Then they asked me to be the house mother of the 6 and 7-year-olds, and I had 23 kids assigned to me, and I was just about to turn 22, and it was very interesting. They gave me a tour of the place, and when I got in the kitchen, there was this very nice-looking, skinny young man, and after the person who was escorting me around the building wanted us to go to the next place, this skinny young man came over to me and he said, "Hi, I'm Joe. Are you here for a job?" And I said, "Well, I'm having an interview today, yes." And he said, "Oh, well, I'll cross my fingers that you get it." And the man who was escorting me around the building says, "We need to go." And the young man said, "Well, I'm Joe, and I hope you're going to get the job." So we left, and when I took over the dormitory with the little boys, he would stop in and say hello to me and see if there was anything I needed. Well, I had to do the laundry for all these kids. Now, I don't mean actually do the washing. We'd have to put it into bags, and then a commercial laundry would pick it up. So one night when I was trying to do the laundry, chaos started in the dormitory, and Joe came in and put a stop to it and said to me, "You get in there and do your laundry. I'll take care of the boys." So about an hour later, after everybody had gotten to sleep, he came in and helped me fold the laundry. And all of a sudden, he leaned over the table we were folding things on and kissed me on the cheek. Well, then he says, "You're going to marry me." Well, I was just dumbfounded. I said, "I don't even know you. What makes you think you know me well enough?" And he says, "Oh, well." I said, "You're just crazy." He said, "Well, that might be true, but I'm crazy about you." So I just thought this was very, very odd. But he invited me to go down to the dining room and have a cold drink after we finished the laundry. So I had not been home from college for months, and having gone directly to Lawrence Hall, which was the name of this institution, my mother didn't know anything about it. But the kids were being sent off to camp for the summer. So I decided to go home and stay with my mom, who was a widow. I was there about 3 days when the phone rang, and my mom picked it up and answered it. And the next thing I know, she said, "Edith, there's someone named Joe on the phone." And she had this expression on her face as if, "Who the hell is Joe?" And I said, "Oh, thank you." And I took the phone. And Joe was an engineering student at the time. And when he worked at Lawrence Hall, he went to college in the morning. He was on the GI Bill at that time, because this was 1952. And then he'd come to the hall, and he was the night cook. So after the phone call was through, I had invited him to come out to Downers Grove, which is about 20 miles from where we were in Chicago. Told him how to take the train out there, and walked down to the station and met him. And he obviously wanted to shake my hand, but he was having trouble because he had a nice pot of flowers that he was taking to my mother. So
smart.
After we got in the house, she invited him to stay long enough to have supper with us. And we had a very nice conversation, and she went out to the kitchen to cook. And I said to him, "Joe, nobody seems to know your last name, and I don't know it either. What on earth is it?" Because always anybody asked him, he'd say, "Oh, you can't pronounce it." So he told me it was Joseph Francis Vosefski. And he says, "I want to know something about your family. I've never heard you speak of your father." And I said, "Well, that's because when I was 16, he was killed by a drunk driver." And I told him a little more of the details and burst into tears. Well, my mom could hear me sob as she came dashing out from the kitchen, like she was wondering if I'd just been molested or something. The expression on her face was that way. I told her, No, there's nothing wrong. I said, I just was telling him about Dad's death. And she excused herself and went back to the kitchen. Well, when we had dinner, it went very well. Joe kept telling her all kinds of funny stories about his experience in the Army in Italy. And when it was time for him to catch the train, he got up, walked around the table, and stood at attention right by my mother's chair. And he said to her, "Mrs. King, I just want you to know that I'm very much in love with your daughter, and I want to marry her, and I hope I'll get your blessing when the time comes." Well, I was just amazed, and my mother looked kind of shocked, and she looked over at me, and I shook my head so that he couldn't see that I shook it no, because I hadn't any idea this was going to lead anywhere. And when he left, I had the feeling that I didn't want him to go, and I knew that I had a cross-examination coming along from my mother. That's the way our romance got started. I think we need to explain how I titled the book. It's dedicated to 4 of my doctors because I got to the age of 90 because I've had some very fine medical help. And I never had doctors that were so personally involved and caring as these four men were. So I had a long, long stay in the hospital when I was just about to turn 89. And it was just the most unusual thing. And when I finally got out of the hospital and went for a follow-up visit, my primary doctor said to me, "You know, Edith, you are just like a cat. I wouldn't bet that you didn't have more than 9 lives if somebody asked me, because no matter what's happened to you or what we do as doctors with you, we can't kill you. You always survive." And I had pneumonia in both lungs and MRSA in my nose, and they all were expecting me to die. I was in intensive care for almost a week. But I just don't believe in being sick. And I know that sounds very funny, but I tell the doctors that too. I said, you know, you guys better do your very best because I'm not ready to die. And that with your guidance and my intelligence, we're going to get me well.
That's how you came up with the title, The 9 Lives of Curious Edith. Edith, we have to fly. That was a great story, and I'm glad you told us how it came around to the title of the book. Thank you so much. Keep on spreading your optimism.
Great.